We recognize that too.
Sorry, I really thought I was in the audience. Yeah, I
Keep
know.
the doctor away.
Put that for the board president, yes.
Welcome.
All right, good evening. At the March, so you can hear me. I don't know who can hear me, who can't hear me. So at the March 18th board agenda work session, Mr. Dorn, Mr. Swartz, and I shared updates on the capital projects that have finished, the ones we're planning, upcoming, and the status of our current facility master plan work. Along with the planning of the second phase of the facility master plan. At that time, I recommended that the board consider amending the second phase of the facility master plan, largely related to the inflationary cost of construction versus when the plan was originally created. The amended phase would address the building's construction in the 1960s. So that would include Sherrington, Huber Ridge, Blendon Middle School, and Walnut Springs Middle School. And a new phase would be created to address the buildings in the 70s to include Mark Twain, Robert Frost, and then Westerville North. At that meeting, the board asked us to seek feedback about the potential changes in the upcoming committee meetings. Excuse me. I had the opportunity to share the presentation with the Finance Committee on April 1st and the Strategic Planning Committee on April 10th. Mr. Dorn shared the presentation with the Westerville Parent Council on April 17th. The feedback we received was overwhelmingly in support of amending the second phase of the facility master plan, and understanding that it was largely based on cost. We also have received the estimated project costs from Elford, who we have been working with on the estimates along with the potential project timelines, which everyone wants to know how long it's going to take. Their estimates have totaled just under $134 million for those first 4 buildings, the buildings constructed in the 1960s. Those estimates include escalation contingencies, so continuing to see any changes in that, along with design contingencies. We would like to continue to investigate the cost of the expansion of the ELC versus an alternative site, which did come up in a theme in some of the feedback we received. Along with defining the work and getting cost estimates for the performing arts spaces, stadium support spaces, a parking lot and playground work, to consider using existing funds to fund those projects. We plan to still address the need for gym walls at Mark Twain and Robert Frost Elementary School. We have upcoming projects at McVeigh, Wilder, and Heritage Middle Schools for their balconies as well. Through capital planning, we address those projects. We know the asks need to be reasonable for our community to support this work. We have bond millage coming off, so I'll refer to Mrs. Marshall to discuss that.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Dennis. So as we've discussed previously, we have a 2000 bond issue that has bonds rolling off. The millage that's collecting today, according to the county auditor, is right around 1.7 mils, so our payment's about $6.3 million a year. We do have the opportunity to, with a new ballot issue, we could ask our voters to support a sort of a no new millage situation that would let us generate right around $140 million, which would be enough to take care of the 4 buildings that we were talking about based on Elford's estimates. So as we move forward and we have our work session in May and we update the 5-year forecast, I'd like to have those conversations through that work session to figure out how we can maybe use some existing resources for the other things so that we're not going back to our community for additional millage ask with the bond issue.
Mrs. Dennis, could you give just a quick update in case somebody is just catching this and didn't watch the initial meeting, although I would encourage folks to go back and watch the March 18th work session, of how we would address those other 3 buildings in the next phase? And specifically, I know we've gotten a lot of questions even in the feedback about how we would pay for the North project.
Absolutely. So we would look for a bond ask to support the work of the next 2 buildings as well, and those would be Mark Twain and Robert Frost, along with needing to have community support for any work that would be done at North. Even when we become eligible for the CFAP funding, classroom assistance, facility Facility Assistance Program. Got those letters out of whack there.
Could you just explain that really quickly, because
Going
there may
to.
be people in the audience that don't know what that is.
Yep.
Thank you.
So, in 2019, we joined the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission's Expedited Local Partnership Program. What that meant is, at the time, with the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission, we were not eligible for funding at that time. So we opted to go in and go ahead and start the work. We take credits on the approved work based on the Ohio Classroom Design Manual. And it basically sits as a credit that just kind of waits for us to become eligible. And that eligibility is based upon funding that the state provides to the OFCC. So when you become eligible, that's when you are considered CFAP eligible, Classroom Facility Assistance Program eligible. Our district is at a 35% match, so 35 cents of every dollar of design work that's in the manual. So we have right now, with the work that has been completed in the phase 1 of the facility master work that's been approved by the OFCC, roughly 24 million in credits. We'll have additional credits for the work that will be completed this summer. And then any work that's done in this potentially amended second phase of the facility master plan credits, hopefully we become eligible by the time North becomes up to us. So let's say that that is double what we have now at $48 million. That we could apply towards a project like Westerville North, a segment of the work that we're doing in our facility master plan. And when you become eligible, they take that 35 cents on the dollar off the top of the project at that time. So that's what we would look to do to fund a project like North, understanding that there's still a lot of concept around what we do with North, given what I presented in that, with the 76% of the educational spaces not having any access to natural light. And modular wall systems that were used during different phases of that building's additions and reconstruction. So it's best to kind of delay that work. Did I answer that fully?
You did. I would just add to that from a timeline, because I know we've been asked a lot about that we did have a meeting with the state, and we're now 29th on the list. So if you want to talk a little bit about kind of how that works, maybe.
Yeah, so 29 sounds long, right? Don't be discouraged by that. There are typically districts who become eligible and will defer their eligibility at that time. So they can kind of see back and forth. They can't guarantee us anything. They can't tell you it'll be X date and this year. But they do continue to share with us that we're looking at somewhere in that 5-year range. Potentially, no promises. I don't know. We'll keep working towards that. Mrs. Marshall did ask a really great question at that meeting. If you don't mind me, you can go ahead and share what you asked.
So I have worked with the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission for a long time, but I had been asking them for as long as I've been with the district, you know, how far out are we? And it's always been 5, 6, 7 years. So I asked them, so if we come up with eligibility, but we already have all of our projects done, and we are sitting on a $50 million credit, will you just write me a check so that I can pay back our bonds with that?
By me, she means the Board of Education.
Yes, that's what that was the question. And they said yes. So they don't know how that would work exactly, but they do think that that would be due to Westerville, and that's what, if it got to that. Hopefully, our time would come up. I do have concerns about some of the conversation that our state legislators are having around providing capital dollars for private schools. I do think that that could potentially slow down our eligibility timeline, so.
Very concerning.
It is.
And so you mentioned Mark Twain and Robert Frost as another bond, but we're talking, just for clarification purposes, we're talking like 5 years out.
Correct.
Yeah.
We would look at a similar, this phase of work to be a 5-year plan, and when, within that 5-year plan, we're starting to look at the next 5-year plan. We believe overall that this facility master plan is starting to develop an ongoing 5-year plan as we move forward, just to make sure that we are keeping with our community current on the status of our buildings.
And I know there was some comments and questions about the safety in Robert Frost and Mark Twain, and you had mentioned we're going to be putting some walls up to try to make sure that they are safe during voting periods.
Yeah, so Robert Frost and Mark Twain's elementary school gymnasium still remain open to the building. And the Board of Elections in statute has the right to use our buildings regardless of how we feel about it. So we recognize this to be a challenge at those locations, and we believe it's important to go ahead and address that sooner rather than later.
Would just add to that, so we are looking at it from a facility standpoint, but just so our parents are aware, we are also talking with the Board of Elections, encouraging for some alternative sites in the meantime. So we are looking at that from some different angles, too.
I do think it's important to share too, in that conversation with our consultant from the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission, I asked if there was a resolution specific to amending that second phase of facility master work, because the board did approve a resolution to re-enter that work. And there is not a resolution specific. So that is at the local level. When you make the decision to support that amendment, we would just notify them. So there's no formal resolution required at this time. Question?
Nicole, do you want to give a little bit of background when we talk about the possibility of a no new millage for a bond? And that was a 2000 bond issue, right? And give a little bit more info on that, you know, where are we collecting it now, and what would a no new millage mean for the community?
So it's a current bond issue that's been in place since 2000. We are making payments to that, on those bonds every year. And so if the community passes a new bond issue, instead of that millage falling off, it would remain at its current level. So the millage wouldn't change going forward. So as we have looked at the facilities master plan, I came into the district in 2018. The district had already gone through numerous facilities master planning committee meetings and had a plan and priorities in place and all that. And so my job when I got here was, how do we pay for it, right? The plan was already there, but how do we get that done? And so we looked at, with Westerville South, we issued some certificates of participation using our current PI dollars. So that was using existing resources from a levy already approved by our voters. We discussed the first 5 years with the 2019 bond issue. So that was for $103 million. And it was estimated on the ballot at 1.95 mils. We've never collected that at 1.95 mils. I think when it came on in 2021, it was probably closer to, I don't know, 1.2 mils, something like that, because of the way values work. And I have a whole presentation on this if anybody's ever interested in hearing about it. But at that time, when we looked at what we had coming off in terms of millage, so we just had another former issue that just dropped off. I don't know that anybody really noticed it, but it was around $0.5 mil that came off of the tax rolls. And that was from another bond issue from years back. And so we knew this was coming. This has been part of the timeline. We knew that we would have this drop off. It's coming in 2027, but we're able to structure the debt that will allow us to capture that with level payments that our voters won't see a difference with the millage. So we knew this was coming. This has sort of been the plan all along. We were actually originally intending on being on the ballot last November, but you know, all the things with COVID and everything that happened. And so this is where we are with the phasing of the work. And I think the construction inflation, we built our new elementary school that opened, Minerva France Elementary, opened in 22-23 for $18 million. To build that same school today, it would be closer to $36 million. So it's almost doubled. So that's a significant reality that we're dealing with as we look towards the future. And we want to be mindful of our community and we know that we can't continue to put more and more on them, and so we do want to make sure that we stay within that, to not add any more for the bonds.
I think it's a delicate balance though, right? Like, we've got to meet the needs of what the students need and our staff, and then just keep the community in mind. And it's really hard.
Yeah.
I do like the amendment of the plan. Makes sense to me. I'm supportive of it.
I like it as well. During the presentation, the initial presentation, I was very concerned about the cost, the potential cost to the community, and looking at it in the way that, our thoughts are evolving and getting that input from people about what is feasible, what is not feasible as regards what the community needs from us, as well as what we need from the community, obviously. But making the change to the plan and focusing on the bond issues rolling off so that we don't place additional bond burden on the community, I think is the most appropriate way to look at this, especially when you balance that with the potential for state dollars to come in, potential, down the road. And hey, haven't we moved up? Weren't we like 80-something on the list? And now we're up to 29? So we are making significant progress. So that, and I know, never bet on what the legislature is going to do. But at this point in time, that idea of using a no new millage for the bond and looking at how we can capture as much from state resources as possible is, in my mind, the most prudent way that we go about achieving this funding. The other component that I think is extremely important, and I want to go back to it, is the utilization of existing funds. That's another big piece as we look at how we structure the facilities plan, how we structure operating dollars, all of those pieces going forward. We're going to have to pay really close attention to what we do with the existing fund balance. So as we look at how that might work, I'm interested in your thoughts about what and how we might use some of those monies and how that might impact our ongoing capital improvements. Yeah, yeah. We got rid of Robert's rules, so you can just jump in whenever.
Just checking. So I think that, it's very important for us to make sure that money that we've already received or are currently receiving from our community is being used in the most appropriate way. There are several items that we can address by using existing funds. So while the bond millage that may drop off, that will drop off, may generate, 140 million, and we know these projects are estimated at 134 million. There leaves a little bit of a gap there that some of this work can be addressed through. But also addressing some of these other things that we know that we have needs right now. We have needs to improve our performing arts spaces right now. We have needs to take a look at our existing, but also some additional support spaces at our stadiums, things like locker rooms and restrooms, just very basic items. But we're also talking about, is this the right time to go through the district and replace all of our T8 light bulbs with LEDs, and then use some of that savings that we generate to pay for those projects? So we've got a lot of things in front of us that are open for us to do, and we're just looking for that nod of commitment to allow us to move forward.
I did just want to make mention that as we are sitting here talking about all of the funding needs for the district and having to go back to the taxpayers of this district, that this is in part due to the fact that the state legislature does not fully fund their share of the public school systems in Ohio. And we would love to have community help in contacting those state legislators to help ensure that they continue to implement the Fair School Funding Program. There is no budget they're not doing budget negotiations this year. They'll be doing budgets next year in 2025. But if you need to know who your state legislators are, let us know.
I really appreciate all the work that's gone into this, and I agree, I think it's a very thoughtful approach where, as Ms. Stevenson said, we're balancing the needs of our community and the needs of our staff and our students. So I appreciate it, and I'm supportive of moving forward with that approach. I don't really have any other questions.
So, Louise, I know this is a ton coming in, kind of getting up to speed, figuring out what we did in the past, where we're going. Do you have any concerns? I mean, funding, yes, but
Yes, aside from funding, no, I think this all makes sense.
yeah. Okay. So it sounds like we're all supportive.
Thank you. We got a lot of work to do now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is sound, and I appreciate it. Got the points right here. The adjustment of the plan, the no new millage, the use of existing funds, the leveraging our projects for state dollars and to complete local projects. Those components make strong fiscal sense, and they do a lot of what we need to do.
Yeah. Thank you.
I do just want to mention with setting the bond amount at the 140 million, we will have a resolution before the board so that they can get started on some of the work. So it will be like a reimbursement resolution that we can.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Dennis and Mr. Schwartz and Mr. Dorn. Appreciate the team's work on all of that. I know it's a lot.